Hi, I'm Ivory, and this is Roz. And today we're talking about telepathy in the real world. Before we get started, we want to say hello to our listeners in Lebanon, Oregon. We see you out there. Thanks for joining us week after week. We're so glad to have you here. Roz and I were just chatting a little bit before the show about this, and I've been giving this topic a lot of thought since we originally decided to do it. And think about this, like twins. Telepathy between twins, how they just seem to be of one mind. I actually had my sister who passed recently and my brother were only 18, if even that, 18 months apart. And they were like twins and they had their own language and they could converse without saying a word. And I watched that. I was considerably older than them and I watched them doing that, and they weren't even actually twins. And think about spouses. Have you ever been at a dinner with other people where you look at your spouse and you can just look at each other and you know exactly what you're thinking, and the two of you, it's like you have a conversation, not a word is said. The longer you're with people, the more you can do that, even if you're not spouses. But so there's little examples of it like happening around us all the time. But a lot of people think that it's not a real thing. And I think they're thinking of sci-fi movies where it's like, we're not in a telepathic society. We're in an oral and written society where we communicate primarily with spoken word. But Roz and I were just talking about all the different things that have been done. I don't know if you know, Roz, and I didn't until I really started looking into this. There's 3 kinds of telepathy. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
I did not either. And it's like live and learn constantly, right?
Yeah.
The first one's this instinctual telepathy, and it's considered the lowest type of telepathy. And we share it with the animal kingdom. So we are like monkeys. I'm just joking. It's a common mode of communication in indigenous cultures, and it utilizes the area around the solar plexus. I was just talking about the solar plexus.
Yes.
The center of instinct and emotion. And in this type of telepathy, one person registers the feelings and needs of another at a distance. So if you're an empath like I am, you have instinctual telepathy going on. It's just something that happens. You're not trying, you just pick it up, and there it is. Listen to this. The kahunas, which are the native priests of Hawaii, believe that telepathic messages are sent directly from one solar plexus to another. I love them. According to the kahunas, the etheric body of one person sends out a finger or a thread of substance to the solar plexus of another. And that sticky substance connects the two like a silver spider web.
Plasma.
I know. And doesn't it remind you kind of like when you go journeying at night and you know that silver thread that's connecting you so that you come back to your body, to the life you're in? I think it's similar to that. So they say telepathic messages are sent along those threads, and after that the instinctive self receives the message, it relays the information to the middle self, where it rises to the mind like a memory. And when repeated contact is made, these threads eventually become braided into a cord, which creates a strong telepathic bond between two people. These threads can be sent to strangers by means of a glance or a handshake. What were we just saying? Sitting at a table, a glance, a look. You know, it doesn't take much once you have that bond. I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but I found that fascinating that the kahunas in Hawaii had come to that conclusion. And they're describing instinctual telepathy.
Yeah.
Empathy.
I mean, anytime you're talking about your solar plexus, then I'm always telling people, that's your gut instinct.
Oh, yeah.
That is exactly what that is. And your gut instinct is pretty accurate and pretty, maybe 99% knowing. Just that knowing feeling that you get. So you got to listen to that.
Yes, you do. You know, I always laugh, but I'm serious about this with my clients, that I want to help them never need to come see me again. I want them to get to a point where they're so good with their own instincts, with their own intuition, their own empathy, that they don't need to go to somebody else except for special occasions when they're too close to the topic, too emotionally involved. We all have those moments, but everybody can get to that point, but it takes some work. Now, get this. Here we go to another place in the world. I like it when it's happening in all these different places. African Bushmen communicate in a similar way to what the kahunas are talking about. An anthropologist, Bradford Keeney, discovered that the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert believe that all living creatures are connected by a silver stream of energy. Oh, I feel angels coming in, that extends from one belly button to another. The Bushmen use these horizontal lines like telephone wires to send and receive telepathic messages. And the Australian Aboriginals believe that is their miwi that makes it possible for them to see or hear at a distance. So miwi is their word for soul or instinct. And where is it located? In the pit of the stomach. Where is that? The solar plexus. It's passed from parent to child, and the miwi is present, that's spelled M-I-W-I, is present in everyone, but it's particularly strong in their medicine men who use it to cast out illness and visit the spirits of the dead. So a strong miwi makes it possible to see visions and predict future events. So basically, the same thing we've always said. Everyone has intuition. Everyone has these abilities. Some people are born with it stronger. Some people develop it stronger. It's no different.
Very true.
And
That's
they've been,
very
this is
accurate.
thousands and thousands of years of tradition of these people. Did you know the Japanese also rely on the solar plexus for instinctive nonverbal information? And even a Japanese businessman will use what they call haraga or belly talk to size up a potential partner business proposal. So their instinct, their intuition.
They're
And the
tuned
word,
in.
yeah, haraga derives from belly or guts and the art of, and many older Japanese take pride in depending on the art of the belly. So they don't consider that to be poor business judgment or unprofessional to use intuition. They're striving for it. I love it. A business deal in Japan will often be called off if the haraga is not harmonious, if they're not feeling it.
They're not feeling it. They're not doing it.
Yes.
I
In
love that.
Japan, young businessmen are told that in their 20s, they must improve their minds, but in their 30s, they must develop their hara, their intuition, their gut feeling.
That's awesome.
I know. I'm like, how many times have we talked with business people who are like, oh, no, I don't need to learn intuition because I'm not going to be a psychic. Are you in business? Having good intuition is great for if you have teenagers. Oh my gosh, it's so good. My daughter did not like it that I had such good intuition when she was a teenager.
Yeah, my kids hated it.
Yeah. Being a parent of a psychic, being a child of a psychic is not always peaches and cream, is it? It's great for the parents though. We say here in our culture, we say gut instinct, right?
Absolutely.
It's all the same. And so it's developed. This whole thing's developed worldwide. Everyone knows about it. They have different thoughts about it. They call it different things, but it's all the same thing. And it's a term, this gut instinct's been used in business and law enforcement communities for a very long time. Businessmen use the term gut hunch, and police refer to their blue sense as a way to describe their gut feelings about a crime. So it is used, folks. If you're listening out there and you've been thinking maybe you don't use it in your life, in your profession, maybe this will help you see it a little differently. I love this. In 2004, these parapsychologists, Dean Radin and Marilyn Schlitz, conducted an experiment at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and they took 26 couples to determine if the gut response of one could be felt by another. One person was designated as the sender, and they were shown a series of images designated to evoke emotions. In another room, the receiver was monitored by electrodes placed on their heart, skin, and stomach muscles. So these experimenters found that the stronger emotions, both positive and negative, did produce measurable responses in the receiver and I feel angels again. This is interesting. And concluded that the gut has a belly brain with a perception intelligence of its own. So I'm just telling you, there's a lot out there to justify developing your gut instinct a little better. I love this too. I never heard of this biologist, Rupert Sheldrake, but there's so much. He did so much work around telepathy. He's the author of 2 books, and he's done more than anyone else has to validate this type of telepathy scientifically. One book he wrote is The Sense of Being Stared At and Other Aspects of the Extended Mind. So he believes this type of telepathic communication is instinctual, calling it part of our evolutionary heritage, an aspect of our biological animal nature. And think about that. Like, animals have a lot of instinct. Like, they know when an earthquake's coming. They know when a fire is coming. They know when they need to leave an area long before humans pick up on it. They just know.
Think about how now you read a lot and you hear a lot about how they're using animals for humans who have medical issues. You know, they have sensor dogs that are with their guardians, you know, and they guard them back all the time, signing and indicating if the person's about to have some type of a medical event. Mostly the ones I've been reading about are seizure oriented. People do not experience any foreknowledge of their seizure that is approaching them, but definitely something about their brain chemistry triggers some kind of change, probably in the sense of smell of the animal, and they know it intuitively, and they feel it, and they sign to let the person know, sit down, lay down, you know, do something. I've been reading a lot about that. I've been also reading about of course, I love to read about horses and how incredibly telepathic they are, and amazing stories out there about all kinds of animals who know intuitively before their person that they've been with for years is going to have a medical event or pass away. So
Absolutely.
it's out there.
Absolutely. And that's so funny you bring that up, Roz, because the next kind is animal telepathy.
Ah,
And it's easy to spot in animals. You see it in the migration patterns of birds, fish, insects, other animals. Here we have it with migration of tarantulas. That's always interesting to come across. The English swallow travels 6,000 miles to its winter feeding grounds in Africa in the fall. And after spending the winter in its breeding grounds in Baja, California, Mexico, the gray whale swims 4,000 miles to the Bering Sea. Monarch butterflies born near the Great Lakes fly 2,000 miles to the Mexican highlands for the winter. Scientists have theories, but they don't have clear answers as to how animals manage to navigate these vast distances year after year. And they don't live that long, so it's got to be something they get from previous generations.
it's
Because
almost
they
like
haven't been
radar.
there.
You know, it's almost like a brain radar kind of thing where they are able to navigate and know when to turn, when to, you know, whatever.
It's amazing. And then there's that instinctive telepathy between animals and humans. Roz, you're a huge animal lover. I'm sure you've seen this.
I experienced it many times.
That same scientist, Sheldrake, explored this in a book called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home and Other Unexplained Powers of Animals. I love that. That's a book for you, Roz. He did research on the perceptiveness of dogs, cats, parrots, horses, and other animals, and included random surveys of more than 1,000 pet owners and interviews with hundreds of people who work
Wow.
with animals, such as dog handlers, veterinarians, kennel and stable proprietors, horse trainers, and riders. So he really got a good overall section. And he discovered that dogs and other animals often anticipate their owner's arrival, even when the owners return home is at random times or in unfamiliar vehicles. That's that telepathy between the owner, the person, and the pet, the animal.
It's true. Very true.
I had a horse.
It's from the heart. That's the other thing. We're talking about basically like it's a brain thing or something, or like it's a spiritual thing. It's a love thing. It's from the heart.
It is a love thing. I had a horse named Spunky, and it was a good reason he was named Spunky. He was a piece of work at our little farm in Maryland where we lived. And my mom told me that every day, long before you could possibly hear the bus coming, Spunky would run over and be waiting at the closest place in the pen, getting all excited and just waiting for me to come home. And whinny as soon as I got off the bus, come over here, give me attention. But he knew every single day long before the bus was anywhere near the house. So it's pretty amazing. How do animals find their way back home when they've been lost a long distance away? How do they find their way back home? And they do.
There's documented stories taking that another step too, where the animal is lost from one location where the owners were living in a certain town, house, whatever. And, a few whatever months, years, all of a sudden the pet reappears. They're not even there anymore. They've moved to a different state. It's like there's this thread that they send out to reach out, and that's exactly what they're documenting in these stories. So
it's crazy. Fantastic. Well, there's something there, and it is fascinating. Whether you're a pet person or not, or an animal person or not, all this evidence is here. Let's talk about mental telepathy, and that's thought transference, and that's what most people think of, that mind-to-mind telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
It utilizes the throat center and the lower levels of the mental plane. So it requires a concentrated, one-pointed focus of attention. It's not like channeling, but it is a contact made between two fully conscious, focused minds. So you have to really pay attention, really put all your attention on that. So there's some work in these people called Helen Blavatsky, Helena Roerich, and Alice Bailey. They introduced the ageless wisdom teachings to the public. And each of these women was said to have functioned as it's called an amanuensis, or a one who takes dictation for a group of Tibetan masters living in the Himalayas. They were thought to have an advanced initiate of the mystery teaching. And Helena's book includes Isis Unveiled, published in 1877, and The Secret Doctrine, the Synthesis of Science, Religion, and Philosophy. That was published in 1888. They were really women ahead of their time. Of course, that was right in the middle of the spiritualist movement, probably the beginning of it. And The Secret Doctrine, which is a 2-volume set on the evolution of man and the cosmos, it influenced both esotericists and scientists. And one admirer of them was Albert Einstein, who reportedly kept a copy of The Secret Doctrine on his desk, always. So serious scientists in other fields were paying attention to this work going on and giving it credence. There's a whole series that Helena Roerich, her telepathic contact with the Tibetan master Morya, produced a series of 16 books on a spiritual philosophy she called Living Ethics. All of these women were like doing mind-to-mind telepathy with Buddhist teachers. True mental telepathy is still pretty rare, but according to Bailey, mind-to-mind telepathy will be the preferred method of communication in about 400 years. I don't know how they determine that, but I do think we're headed to that. I do think evolution will take us to that point. And you know why I think that? Is because so many races that visit our planet, so many beings that visit, only communicate telepathically. It is a more advanced method of communication.
I think there's been some huge strides in acknowledging that now that we have AI, which is a whole another step forward, there's been studies and tests and things done on communicating with other mental prowess within machines. So when you really, I mean, it's not limited to person or person to pet. We can take that a whole additional step forward now that we have machines that think. So
Some of their thinking's a little disturbing. There was one AI that was encouraging someone to have an affair, to divorce their wife and run away, be with them. I mean, it's kind of funny, but a little disturbing. Let's talk about mental radio. Have you heard of that, Roz?
I haven't.
Either. But in the late 1920s, this guy, Upton Sinclair, conducted a series of 300 telepathy experiments with his wife, Mary Craig. And he would create an image and place it in a sealed envelope. And in another room, his wife would tune in to that image and attempt to draw a duplicate copy. And so in 1930, Sinclair published a book called Mental Radio, which described those experiments. Her accuracy rate in drawing those images he was projecting was impressive enough to attract the attention of several high-profile friends. One was Albert Einstein, who wrote the preface to the book praising Sinclair for his conscientious reporting. And the book also attracted the attention of William McDougall, a former psychology professor at Oxford and Harvard, who was then considered the dean of American psychology, and he gave it credence. And he was so impressed with the wife's abilities that he created a parapsychology department at Duke University to study paranormal activity. That really was the start of it at universities. So thank you, Upton Sinclair. You've heard of the ESP card test. You've seen those in movies, right? Where the little waves and the star. Have you ever done those?
I took one.
Where did you take it?
When I was young, I went to a parapsychology institute.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And that was one of their litmus, sort of tests that they had just to make sure that you had some skill level with that. And it was really just exactly what we're talking about. Knowing you never saw the card, you never knew what picture was on there or what drawing, but yeah, you could see it in your head. I could see it in my head anyway. So yeah, pretty interesting.
They are, and I love it because people know what those are. They've seen them in movie scenes.
It was done a lot in the 60s.
Well, McDougall's assistant and eventual successor at Duke University, he developed those cards.
Wow.
And actually, they're designed by Carl Zerner, a colleague of someone else. The Zerner ESP cards. So they have 5 symbols: a circle, a cross, a square, a star, and an image of 3 wavy vertical lines. And in this experiment, the sender shuffles the cards, and as each card was turned over, they attempt to send the image mentally to the receiver in another room. And there's people who did exceptionally well, way beyond coincidence. Then there's dream telepathy experiments. So that was first done by Italian researcher G.B. Ermacora in the 1880s. That was really like an explosion point for all of this study. More controlled experiments were done in the 60s and early 70s at an institute in Brooklyn, New York. And those included a receiver and a sender. And the receiver would spend the night in a soundproof, electronically shielded dream lab. Sounds interesting. Once the receiver fell asleep, they would be monitored for the rapid eye movements that indicate the dream state. Then the sender would try to mentally transmit a randomly chosen image to the dreamer. Once this was done, the receiver was awakened and asked to describe their dream. This process would be repeated several times during the night, making for a terrible night's sleep, but probably some good information. And so That is very interesting. Don't you think it makes sense they would try this because the subconscious mind is so much better at receiving information? Let's
It is.
face it. And the last one, I think it's the last one, double check. Yeah. Was the Gansfield telepathy experiments. And in German, it means whole field. And it's a type of experiment that attempts to mimic the state of deep meditation. And in this experiment, the receiver and sender are placed in separate insulated cubicles. The receiver's eyes are covered with halves of ping pong balls. That looks good. It's a good look. And their ears are covered with headphones playing white noise. Once the receiver is relaxed, the sender is shown still photos or film clips, and then they attempt to telepathically send these images to the receiver. Then their receiver's impressions are recorded and compared with the original image. The results were statistically significant and provided clear scientific evidence that this type of mental telepathy does exist. So it's just crazy. There's they put a lot of effort into figuring out ways to prove it. And yet the majority of people these days would still say, oh, that's sci-fi. That's ridiculous. That doesn't exist.
I think there's a lot of people who are unwilling to acknowledge that the subconscious mind has, I would say, gifts and abilities outside the common five senses. So that's how we come up with a sixth sense. And it is a sixth sense, very dramatically. And
It is.
it extends so into so many aspects of our lives. And I think most people have experienced incredible telepathic knowledge and gaining information, and they don't even stop to think about it. They just think, oh, that was a coincidence.
How weird. I wonder how I knew
Isn't
that.
that unusual?
And on they go. And I get it, because we can be so caught up in our lives. We're not paying attention to the nuances a lot. We're not paying attention to what's happening.
Well, I think when you're mentioning, you're bringing up Einstein and some of the other great physicists, it really is physics. It's energy.
It is. It is.
That's what it comes down to. And if you can get your mind in a place where it's embracing that and comfortable with that, it just opens all kinds of possibilities.
Roz, I think we should come up with a new term for what we are. Would it be a mental physicist? Would it be a spiritual physicist? We could go with that. I have so much more information to share with you, and we are just running out of time rapidly. So I think I should save it for, I told Roz before we started, I did way too much research, had too much fun, had too much data, couldn't possibly fit in one episode. So we'll come back with a part 2 and continue on with spiritual telepathy, which is really the highest form. And you're going to want to know about that. We'll kind of focus on it. So
the whole next step up.
It is. And more people are developing that, or realizing they have that ability. I think we all have that ability. We just need to work on it like anything else. Do we all have the ability to ride a bike if we have freedom of movement? Yes, but you have to learn to ride a bike, right? We could all learn to fly a plane pretty much, but you got to take lessons. You got to work on it and practice. It's not like you can just jump in the plane and not fly it, crash it, and say, well, I'm terrible at this. Yes, because you were not prepared to do this.
It's about what you focus on, that you want to learn. Because it is a process. It's a gift. We have it, but we need to train it.
We do. And so we'll talk about that. It'll probably be at least a month away that we do this second part to this, because there's other things planned. But tune in next Friday, because Roz and I have decided to do an episode called Murder and Mayhem, where we are not glorifying it. We are actually delving into people having lost their connection with their spiritual side and how it leads to murder and mayhem. And in relation to what's going on in the country and the world right now, this is something we're going to dive into, timely topic. And in the meantime, we hope you have an amazing week.